very much, Chair. I have to say, from a personal point of view, it's been absolutely restorative to be here with like-minded people. One doesn't have to spend half your time convincing others of methodology and ethos. So I'm very happy to be here and be a different person. So I want to talk about the ethical role of universities in community-university partnerships and look specifically at Stellenbosch as a case study in a very specific partnership that they call Partnership for Restitution, looking at visual redress. But before I start, I want to dedicate the presentation to a community leader and activist, Mr. Hector-Kannemeyer. He co-wrote the chapter with me that I'll be sharing on today, and he's been engaged with the university, reminding them of their moral, ethical responsibility for 4 decades until his death 2 years ago. Professor Clark and Costandius of the Visual Arts Department, she's been instrumental in bringing art and creativity into this work, and sadly passed away in a tragic accident a few months ago. And then also to the student activists of 2015-2016, who, through the Freeze Must Fall protests, opened up a different narrative around decolonization and decoloniality at Stellenbosch University. I dedicate this presentation to all of them. So before I start, I want to invite you to look at this through a different lens. I quote decolonial and feminist scholar Sarah Ahmed of 2012, and she says this. She says, I want to offer a different way of thinking about relationships between knowledge and transformation. Rather than suggesting that knowledge leads to or should lead to transformation, I offer a reversal that, in my view, preserves the point or aim of the argument that transformation as a form of practical labor leads to knowledge. The very labor of transforming institutions, or at least aiming for transformation, is how we learn about institutions as formations. So it's the practice of the work, it is the doing of the work that we confront the systems of oppression or lack of transformation with institutions, rather than waiting for knowledge in order to engage with it. So if you could invite you to hold that lens through the presentation, we will check it again afterwards. So I wish to start with a quote from a book compiled by Milton Biscombe and other Stellenbosch University researchers called Inner's Blut. The quote is by Professor Chris Brink, and he was quoted quite a few times in this conference. He was the rector and vice chancellor at Stellenbosch University in 2006, and it is sadly just as relevant today as it was then. He says that Stellenbosch to this day is a divided town. There's the white Stellenbosch of Mosseldracht and De Boert, there's the brown Stellenbosch of Tuxisville and De Vlei, and there's the black Stellenbosch of Kaiamandi and De Brugge. But before all of this, at one time, there was De Platte. There was once a place where people from different backgrounds and religions were free to live here in Stellenbosch. Within 2 street blocks of where the university is located today, there was a community where racial divides were less stark, and that in embryo form already represented the type of community we strive for in this country today. So I'll focus on reimagining belonging, and I want us to frame the work around how do we begin to reimagine belonging in a time when communities of color were forcibly removed. And I'll talk to what does that look like, the forced removals of Stellenbosch, the visual culture at SU where the work is located, our visual redress policy, identity in place, the Stellenbosch University Restitution statement and the understanding of that statement through different lenses, the local school visual redress initiative and visual redress as restitution, as opposed to visual redress as symbolism, and in decolonizing community university partnerships. So I quote from Mr. Hector-Kannemeyer, community activist in the chapter, and he says that Stellenbosch has a submerged history that refuses to be buried. It resurfaces at odd times, presumably calling forth as if the stones in the walls themselves are crying out for justice, as in the words of Prophet Habakkuk. The history of the previous site of the Lukov High School, which was the first picture I showed, has repeatedly been highlighted as being of significance by people identifying with it. The alumni of the school, the descendants of those who lived in close proximity to the school in an area known as the Flakte, and those who have other meaningful relationships with the Flakte, its people or institutions. So before I go to the visual culture, so in Stellenbosch, there was a forced removal in the late 1960s. 3,500 people lost not only their homes, but their sports fields, their churches, their community gathering spaces. People had large-sized properties. They used to have weddings in their gardens. And a lot of the property was acquired by the university, who turned it into university accommodation, and the very building, which was the local school, is where the division social impact, where I'm from, is located. Now, if that doesn't provide an ethical dilemma, I do not know what does. And so, coming back to Stellenbosch, so my research work is focusing on the psychological impact of forced removals and how that trauma is passed on intergenerationally. And so, when I walk to the school, who in my positionality, I'm an alumnus of, and my father was a teacher at the school, so I'm very invested emotionally in this work. So I want to declare that. I immediately, the stark ethical, moral dilemma of giving back to the community in a building that has such a deep meaning for a community produced a huge ethical dilemma. And how do you justify engaging with communities and doing social impact when the very building that you're in was not ethically attained? And the continuous call for the return of the building has been ongoing in the institution for 4 decades. And it's created a lot of tension between the university and community. And I know you mentioned the issue of trust. It's difficult to mend that if the power, the hegemonic power, is so stark in that environment. And so the visual culture at the university has historically offered aesthetic loss that was experienced by mainly white Afrikaner students and staff, which accompanied these welcoming practices. An institutional curriculum that promoted racial stratification and a version of science that justified racial and ethnic separateness. So Stellenbosch University was the country's premier university of apartheid. The shift is from a discourse of racial exclusion towards a discourse that signifies the university's symbolic commitment to redress, restitution, and inclusion. But we felt, and just centering community voices, that the symbolic commitment to redress was just not enough. It just didn't go far enough to restore place identity, a sense of belonging, a shifting power. It had to go beyond symbolism, and that is what we have kind of put pressure on the university to review its policies around symbolic commitment to redress. In 2007, the then rector, Professor Russell Botman, handed over the building to the community symbolically. But the community couldn't access it. And so one has to question the idea of symbolism and who does it benefit? Is it just a conscience soothing approach for the ones that have power? So I'm not going to go through this whole slide, but I want to acknowledge that the protest of 2015-2016 had really set the university on a different trajectory. The work invited university and community to build an ethical pathway towards restitution and full human inclusion, thanks to the students in Stellenbosch and on a national and global level who highlighted the call for decolonial education. So the Stellenbosch University Local for Visual Redress project presents the university and the local community with an opportunity to implement an initiative that could institute visual redress that is community-centered, jointly implemented, and deeply transformational. And it's an opportunity to explore a methodology which is guided by those who have been most impacted and traumatized by the forced removals. And in terms of my research, it shows that if trauma is not healed in one generation, it does become cumulative and grows with each and every generation until a space of healing is provided. And symbolic restitution is not that space of healing. So the aim of the presentation is an opportunity to make meaning of the SE vision, visual redress policy, and the transformation plan. And so what I'm saying is that in order to address the wrongs of the past, we need to have a deeper understanding of the current trauma of people of color who was impacted by those wrongs in order to explore an equal partnership with the surrounding communities that what appropriate redress and development initiatives they would like to heal their own trauma. And so what the community and conversations around with community leaders would say is that the call for handing over the building to its rightful owners must be given a concrete expression, otherwise we cannot actually go forward. And so that calls for a review of that puts the university on the spot and calls for a deep reflection and the moral, ethical responsibility of a university towards its community. And I think the university being located in the community produces a very different opportunity for engagement than a university that is originally moved. And so we engage with the communities and people that wanted to engage. It is easier for me, I think, because I'm from the community, to use that positionality to bridge the barriers of trust. And historically, communities have been called in to rubber stamp and participate on already agreed initiatives by the university. And so there was two proposals to have a garden, a rose garden set up for the Clark community that lost their home and their community, and it was rejected by the community as calling it a grafplaats, a cemetery for the dreams of the community. And another one was a proposed walkway, and communities referred to it as a cul-de-sac for transformation. And so even well-meaning activities that is not birthed out of the people that are mostly impacted is seen as condescending and paternalistic, as Clark and Costandius says in their work. And so we embrace critical participatory action research as methodology that speaks to the very nature of the significant knowledge, wisdom, and expertise of the community. Those who have suffered the most should be at the heart and the center of any kind of restitutive processes. And so the methodology, by very nature, questions what is deemed acceptable knowledge and challenges neutrality and objectivity, since we actually cannot be neutral, objective when we engage. And also inspired by Frere's critical pedagogy, which positions community knowledge as essential and affirms the role of community as essential in responding to the pursuit of justice. So it has a strong liberation focus. It has to emancipate. It has to break down the barriers that oppress. That by very nature makes up critical participatory action research. It confronts the systems of oppression that prohibit local communities from confronting their own challenges. It provides agency. And it's informed by a true commitment to collaborative methodology and pedagogy that encourages and validates the lived experience, ideas, the skills, the contributions, and incorporates local community knowledge into the research methodology in an intentional dialogical process. And so we've spent years just dialoguing, bringing sometimes people that specialize in the field from the university, exposing community partners to this kind of different way of thinking. And we've spent such a long time just engaging and dialoguing. And I put in a proposal in partnership with community leadership around a concept of the local living museum and what it could mean for future generations. And there was in Stellenbosch defense, I think accolades to them, that there was a component that actually lends itself to the organic development of the work, which was funded. It's not often that people provide funding for something that they don't know is going to happen, and so the university had provided for that. And so what is Stellenbosch University committed to? Stellenbosch University says that since 2000, it acknowledges its contribution to the injustices of the past and therefore commits itself to appropriate redress and development initiatives. It says from the Prof. de Villiers. And then from there, with the Restitution statement in 2018, it says that it acknowledges the inextricable connection to the generations past, present, and future, celebrates its successes and contribution towards injustices, and for that there's deep regret. Stellenbosch University apologizes to communities and individuals who were excluded from historic privileges that they still enjoyed, and honor the critical mighty voices of the time who could not be silenced. So in responsibility towards the present and future, some have questioned and critiqued and said, what about the past generations? Stellenbosch University commits itself unconditionally to the ideal of an inclusive world-class university for Africa. So what are we restituting? What are we restituting beyond the return of the building? And we would not know that if we do not ask. And so people have said we're restituting belonging, we're restituting access to education. From the surrounding communities, there are so many schools that actually apply to go to Stellenbosch University because they feel that it is the university for the elites. They would rather travel to UWC where they felt a greater sense of belonging. And so restitution is more than just a building. And so we also are restituting identity in place. And according to Erasmus, Dimitri Erasmus, she said the places where people worked and lived, the spaces where children played, are fundamental to the development of both the community and an individual identity. And this is the same school where a whole community lived. That was the slide I started with. So in a sense of belonging, togetherness, collective participating and sharing activities, that is a crucial element in the formation of identity. And when that place is removed quite violently, the development trajectory of identity formation is also compromised. And so we're also restituting identity. In Sweden, speaks about Hart says it's long been recognized that people are place and place is people. And interpersonal relationships play a central role in the making and meaning of place. In the history of South Africa, however, this intricate relationship has been persistently and willfully damaged. And for the Platte, I said before, I'm not going to go through that, but it was the government regarded it as a slum area. But where that kind of commissioned this horrific removal. But according to Kannemeyer, it was not a slum area. There was no overcrowding, no unclean conditions, no real reason for commissioning such a traumatic relocation. With thousands of so-called colored residents. Today, those buildings are still standing. It is now sometimes international guest houses. So definitely not a slum. And just to give you a feel, I'm just going to go through this quickly. The use of the following buildings after the Stellenbosch removal is an indication of the harshness of the forced removal. The Methodist school was used for a white pre-primary school named Stellenbosch. The Catholic school was demolished and replaced by a local white business. The Anglican school was used by the Stellenbosch traffic department. The Dutch Reformed Mission School was destroyed to make way for a white restaurant. The following congregations lost the use of their buildings. The Volkskerk became St. Paul's Church, with a majority of white members. The congregation of the Methodist Church was removed to Ivers Valley in Luckham Street. The James Lucas School was given to the Air Force. The congregation of the Dutch Reformed Mission Church was removed to Ivers Valley in a church building in Stellenbosch Church. However, the Luckham School remained standing in the midst of the ruin and the rubble of forced removals, which is a taunting reminder of not just what has been lost and alienated in material terms, but also the continuing relationship of power imbalance in the hegemonic dominance from the past that continues to shape the future of the town and its development, says Mr. Conroy. And so the moral and ethical rectitude of transformation must be open to question, and the handing of this historic building will be the acid test. The community was waiting. What is the university going to do? And so their interpretation of the restitution statement is very different from ours. And so what we asked is, what does the community want? And so in 1969, thank you, in 1969, the community was asked to pick up the benches, their school benches, because it was illegal for them to occupy the school and relocate. And we asked them, what do you want? How do we start this process? And they said, we want to bring back the benches. And we thought, the benches are 50 years old. Where will we find these benches? And so we set on a quest to find these original benches. And we held a wonderful ceremony where we found these original benches. And it was absolutely incredible. The rector is pictured on helped carry the benches back. It was a wonderful process of the restitution of dignity for the community and very traumatic. I think there was these people here with their grey hair were 17 when they carried the benches out. You know, they carried them back as 70-year-olds. But the real work would only start when we look at the power dynamics that stem within these partnerships and our understanding of communities as partners. So on the 23rd of June, actually last year, sorry, era day, the director of Stellenbosch University actually made a decision to hand the building back to the community after decades of call. And so the building, the cherished community asset, will take her place after 53 years. And now we can engage with equal partners. So we set up the Look of Living Museum think tank, and it comprises of SU faculty members, the Look of Alumni, community leaders on critical pedagogy, because we're restituting also education and access. So we're working with the teachers in the community and how we could actually set up partners for access. And this is the Look of Living Museum think tank, and we partner with lots of different passionate staff members in the university on memorializing the Flutter and capturing oral history. One of the events we're working on for next week is the Walter Perry lecture, and just before I end, was quite interesting. Walter Perry was a scientist. He couldn't come to Stellenbosch University, where GCT. He was one of the first people of color by a master's degree in nuclear science. Because of he was actually a genius. Stellenbosch University utilized him to do physics experiments with his students with no recognition. And so one of the calls from the community was, we want to do a memorial lecture in his honor, and write his name and put him up on the walls where he belongs. And I have to say, it was not as easy as one could imagine. The narrative of once the community decided this is what we want for him was shifted to, this is a university lecture in collaboration with the community, and the community's like, no, it is a alumni lecture in collaboration. So the power, you have to work with the power all the time, you know. No, we will only find so many people. No, it was like so many people. Who hosts the event? No, it needs to be the vice rector. Now, actually, the local community says we will open the event. So weeks of shifting power in just to make this possible was quite interesting, and I'm reminded of his work around intellectual humility in the practice of community engagement. Where does the power sit, and how my role, especially in directing this work, is to gently hold the power and pull down these oppressive structures that remove community agency. And so really reflecting on how we've gone wrong in just this one lecture. Are they centered? Is it what they need? Are we positioning their agency in the way we engage? And then towards the end, I want to reflect on the initial quotes, that the lessons that we've learned through this engagement over the years is really around when we do the practical labor, which leads to knowledge. The very labor of transforming institutions for any transformation has provided us with a wonderful, endless forms of practice and engagement, do's and don't do, absolutely don't do, that shapes our understanding of where we are and where we need to be and what the gaps are. Thank you very much.